welcome to my May 2024 wrap-up. It's my first full month wrap-up. No weekly wrap-up this week because A, I want to do the May wrap-up, and B, after finishing The Spear Cuts Through Water, I'm kind of in a I don't know what to read next because it was so amazing, and anything that I start is falling short of that reading experience. So I did start something else, but nothing super exciting to talk about yet. So I will catch up on 2 weeks in the next weekly reading wrap up. For now, May reading wrap up, I'll start with some quick stats and then go through all of the books that I read in May in chronological order, just because it's easiest that way. So first, in May, I read a total of 14 books. 2 of those were audiobooks, 2 were ebooks, 1 was a physical comic, 2 were manga ebooks, 1 was a physical manga book, and 6 were physical novels. Of those 14 books, genre-wise, 4 were fantasy, 2 were general literature, 1 horror, 1 mystery, 3 sci-fi, 1 speculative, 1 superhero comic, and 1 suspense or romantic suspense / mystery. Out of ratings, I have an average of 4.0, which kind of shocked me when I pulled that up, but considering what I read this month, not surprised. I had 2 books, I had 1 book that I rated 2 stars, 2 books that I rated 3 stars, 1 book that I rated 3.5, 5 books that I rated 4 stars, and 5 books that I rated 5 stars. I also track what country the author is from, and of those books, 4 the authors were from Japan, 8 from the United States, 1 from Canada, and 1 was co-authored, and the authors were from Canada and the United States. I do also track diversity, not on a granular level, but more of a basic level of the books that I read, and this is diversity of the book itself. So I tracked general diversity, just that includes anything, physical or mental disabilities, anything like that, anything that doesn't fall under the LGBTQIA umbrella, because I track LGBTQIA, I track general diversity, BIPOC, mental, physical disabilities, etc., and then also own voices, which is kind of similar to BIPOC, but also not so. As a caveat, I don't track books such as manga or translated, all the Japanese books, I don't track those as diverse because unless there is some kind of marginalized community being represented outside of, so for example, in Japan, I'm not going to track a Japanese author writing about Japanese characters as diverse in terms of BIPOC, because the Japanese author is not writing from a marginalized community or about a marginalized community in Japan, if that makes sense. But of the books I read, 8 were diverse in some fashion, 7 had LGBTQIA plus rep, and 5 were own voices. Age of the books, the oldest book I read was published in 1981, and the newest was published in 2024. Author familiarity. So I do kind of track this because it's kind of fun to see. I read 5 authors this month that were completely new to me. I've never read them before, and I read 9 that I had read before. I say authors, I should say 5 books from authors, because a couple of them, like the manga, were the same author. And then how I got the books. 8 of the books I already owned, and 6 of them were from the library. So those are my stats. That's what I track. I do keep a big spreadsheet because I like doing that. I keep a spreadsheet, I have Goodreads, and I use Storygraph to track everything. And then I also have a physical bullet journal-ish reading journal that I just track monthly and other stuff, but that's more of like a creative, fun way to track. It's not a really granular level tracker that I do the way I do with like the spreadsheet. So those are stats, and on to the actual books. So almost all these books that I've read, I've talked about in past weekly wrap-ups. So probably way more in depth in them in those weekly wrap-ups. So I'm not going to go super in depth here. But I will link all of the weekly wrap-ups that include all of these books. I'll try to link them in the description if you'd like to see a lot more than what I say here. So the first book that I read in May was My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. 5 stars. I loved this. This is a horror novel featuring a character who is super into slasher films and believes that a slasher film is unfolding around her. Deals with a lot with trauma and PTSD and feeling like an outsider. There are a lot of themes of indigenous people, gentrification, all kinds of stuff happening. But this is very much a, you're gonna like Jade's voice or you're gonna hate Jade's voice, and that decision will that will decide whether you like this book or not. And I loved it. I do have book 2. I don't know when I'm gonna read it because I feel like I love this so much, so I kind of want to give it a tiny bit of a gap between reading book 2, so that, I don't know, like maybe I'm too hyped, maybe I love this too much and I don't want book 2 to be a disappointment. But if I give it some more time, maybe there'll be less like hype, or expectations won't be as high, so I won't be as disappointed in case it's not as great. So but yeah, My Heart is a Chainsaw, first read of May, first 5-star of May. Next I read Rapture and Death by J.D. Robb, which is book, I think, 4 of the In Death series. This one made me decide to stop reading the In Death series. It was a very easy sort of comfort type of read for me, because this series follows very much urban fantasy plot beats and I enjoy urban fantasy a lot, but it's just so of its time. It's so from the 90s. So much of the character decisions, it was just weird. I talked about it way more in depth in the wrap-up, in a couple of wrap-up actually. So 2 stars, ending the In-Depth series there. Next, I read The Butcher of the Forest by Premee Mohamed. This was a 3.5 star for me not because this is a bad book. This is actually a very interesting and well done dark fairy tale. It's just that this leans more towards Gothic, and me and Gothic are like oil and water. Sometimes I'm okay with it, sometimes it works, but for the most part, I just don't really get Gothic literature, or not get, I understand it. It's more like I just don't click with it on a deep emotional level. Something about Gothic themes, Gothic writing, Gothic lit, I always feel so detached from everything that's happening. So unfortunately that's where this fell, but it is a very, very good dark fairy tale. I enjoy Premee Mohamed's writing a lot. Gonna keep reading her, and I would highly recommend this. I would recommend this if you like Gothic, if you like dark fairy tales, if you want to give, a novella from a author who deserves a lot more recognition a chance, then definitely give it a chance. So Butcher of the Forest by Premee Mohamed, 3.5 stars. Next, automatic 5 stars is Yona of the Dawn Volume 41. This is my all-time favorite manga series. This came out last month, April. This came out, I read it within 2 weeks of buying it, and I love the series. Not much to talk about because it's volume 41, but definitely give this series a try. Yona, 5 stars. Next, The Warrior's Apprentice by Lois McMaster Bujold. I started this last year actually on audio, and I just kind of dropped it about a little over 50% in, and then I picked it back up in May and finished it out, and I'm glad I did. I'm going to be jumping back into the Vorkosigan Saga read. I'm reading it all for the first time, discovering all this for the first time, and I'm happy I got back to this. Gave it 4 stars. The audiobooks are good. Talked about a lot more in my reading wrap-up, but I am enjoying everything that Lois McMaster Bujold does with her character work. Her world building's interesting, but her character work is so good. I love it. I do wish that I hadn't started so strong with loving the first 2 novels. Like, the first 2 novels that I read were Shards of Honor and Barayar, which are about Miles Vorkosigan's parents, and the majority of Vorkosigan Saga follows Miles. So I haven't fallen in love with Miles as much as I fell in love with Cordelia, but I'm getting there. I'm enjoying him as a character, so I'm enjoying all the Vorkosgan saga. This is the 4th book I read. So I've read Shards of Anabariyar and Falling Free. I'm kind of reading in a loose chronological order. But yeah. So Warrior's Apprentice, that was a 4 stars, and that was on audiobook. Next, The Brides of High Hill by Nghi. This was new. This is another entry in her Singing Hill Cycle novella series. And I love this series. We follow Cleric Chi in this land as they go about collecting stories and talking to people and having random various adventures in every novella. And in this one, funnily enough, it leans more towards a gothic feel, but this actually worked for me, I think, because of the fact that the story is taking place in a East Asian kind of land, and it has a lot more different sensibilities and different types of culture and stuff like that that isn't drawing from the same gothic roots in American and British literature. So the strength of the story for me was not in its gothicness, but in this world that Nghi has built and the character of Cleric Chi that I already really enjoy. So enjoy this one, Brides of High Hill. This was a strong 4 stars. Not my favorite, but every single one of these novellas are great, and saying not my favorite is still saying like every single one has gotten a 4 stars or more. So a great entry. I'm so happy that this series is going. Nghi is one of my favorite authors at the moment. She's basically an auto read author, if not an auto buy, but read that on audio, and the audio was also really good. Next, I did a reread because I felt myself going into a slump, so I picked this up. This Is How You Lose the Time War. I read this a couple years ago. It was one of my favorite books the year that I read it, and I'm so glad I reread it. It's fantastic. Still love it as much as I did the first time. It's just absolutely stunning. One of my favorite books. This time I highlighted a little bit more. I meant to like annotate and do a lot more. And I always like intend to annotate and tab up and write and stuff. And I'm just like, no, I kind of just want to read. So love this. It's a weird little novel about 2 time agents on opposite ends of a war. There's red and there's blue. And throughout different actions and throughout time and timelines and universes, they write letters to each other and fall in love. So one of my favorite things, and hopefully it'll be just as good when I reread it in a couple of years again. So 5-star reread. 5 stars the first time, 5 stars again this second time. Next, I read the Yakuza's Bias volumes 1 and 2 on ebook. This was so much fun. I talked about it at length in my weekly wrap up that I talked about this in. It's just fun. It's about a strong guy, hard Yakuza guy who ends up falling in love with a K-pop group and has a bias, which is his favorite member. And we watch him spiral into being a huge K-pop fan. It's a lot of fun. As I said in my wrap-ups, I feel like this was written by someone who truly loves K-pop and is a K-pop fan, and they are doing all of this. They're joking and poking fun at K-pop fandom, but like that comes from a place of comfort, and they're laughing with K-pop fandom as opposed to at K-pop fandom. So it was a lot of fun. I'm really glad that I read it. Next, after that, I picked up Fantastic Four. I've owned this for a couple of years. I read Fantastic Four Volume 1, Fourever by Dan Slott. This is the 2018 relaunch of Volume 1. This was fun. This goes back into the fun science family Fantastic Four that I've always enjoyed after a long run of like leaning towards a little grimmer, universes ending, world ending Fantastic Four kind of stuff. This is more like, it does have those elements, but it is science family that love each other and do science and have adventures together. So I loved it. I'm gonna read Volume 2 very soon. After that, read The Tokyo Zodiac Murders by Soji Shimada. This is a classic locked room murder mystery, and I enjoyed it for what it was. I'm finding I'm not a huge fan of the type of murder mystery this is, where we are going along with characters as they solve the mystery, but it's less the story of them solving the mystery as it is them telling us everything about the case, so that, as we learn later in actual like fourth wall breaks from the author, we can try to solve the case ourselves. And I highly disagree with the author that we had everything we needed to solve the case, to solve the puzzle ourselves. The puzzle is ingenious. Like, it was really cool, super crazy. No freaking clue how we were supposed to solve that ourselves with the clues that we were given. So decent book, decent translation, but 3 stars. I just gave it 3 stars. So after that, I read The Necessity of Stars by E. Catherine Tobler. This is a little novelette published by Neon Hemlock Press, and I'm actually doing a project where I'm reading a bunch of Neon Hemlock novelettes that I've bought and received for review. So I don't have anything for this up anywhere except on my Goodreads. I have a brief review there. So if you want to see that, that's there. This is essentially a story, future climate fiction, where this woman who is a UN diplomat, she lives in this garden in France, and there's an alien in her garden, and I will leave it at that. What's next? Generation Ship by Michael Mammay. This was a action-packed sci-fi political thriller. I read it in like 2 sittings, even though it's a very long book. It's like over 600 pages-ish. I read it in 2 sittings, and I enjoyed it for what it was, but I felt like the character work was lacking for me. I do talk about it a lot more, but essentially the character work was lacking for me. The ideas were very interesting, and I enjoyed how the author was very skillful at showing how each character's actions and reactions weave this greater plot that affects every single one of them, but it felt like the characters were there just to make that plot happen. They didn't feel like real people. They felt like caricatures. They felt like puppets who were there just to make the plot happen. So a seesawing between really great plot but characters that didn't do anything for me. So I ended up giving it 3 stars. And then lastly, The Spear Cuts Through Water. I still don't know how to talk about this. I was about halfway through in my last weekly wrap up. Took me a little bit to finish it. I finished about 2 nights ago, and this is the reason why I haven't really picked up anything since, because this was astounding. This was incredible. I am baffled that it wasn't pushed for more awards. I think the only big award that even nominated it last year was the Ursula K. Le Guin Awards, which is astounding to me. Like, oh my god, I'm going to try my best to get a standalone review up for this, because I want to sit down and figure out how to write about this. It was so good. And art like this, fantasy like this that pushes borders in how we tell stories and how we approach writing and storytelling, and how we can push the boundaries on what epic fantasy is and can be, deserves to be read more. It is a hard read, but it is a rewarding. It's so rewarding. It's so good. It's so fucking good. It is a favorite of the year so far. It is in my top 3 of the year so far. And I don't know, I don't know what is gonna top this. Like, it might be number 1. I don't know. It might be my number 1 read of the year so far. I'll have to reflect back on everything I gave 5 stars and see what's what, but I don't know how to talk about it. It's so good. I love this. I want more fantasy literature like this. I just do. Simon Jimenez, between this and The Vanished Birds, that I also loved when I read it. Not quite to the same extent as this, but that I loved it too. So he is now an auto-read author for me, so that is very exciting. So yeah, the last thing I read in May was the best thing I've read in May and the best thing I've read all year, and that is The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. So that is my May wrap up. I just realized that with the way my tripod is set up, my phone is moving a lot, so I'm sorry for any of the wiggling jiggling that's happening. But yeah, that was my wrap up. That was May. That's been a whole month, a little bit more than a whole month of having my channel going and talking about books. I'm very excited to have this going. It's been really cool just doing this and being able to talk about everything instead of only just, you know, writing reviews and sharing, you know, talking about books in the Discord book club that I'm in. Link is down below. But yeah, thank you for watching. Let me know what your favorite book of May was. Let me know what you think about anything that I've read, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye.